The air in the VIP lounge tastes like expensive champagne and my own vanity, a cloying sweetness that usually makes me feel like a king. My phone has been vibrating for 20 minutes with calls from Silas, but I keep my thumb hovering over the ignore button while I check my reflection for the film festival. It is winter 2025, and I am far too important to worry about a husband who can't even walk to the door to say goodbye. I have spent years treating his devotion like a burden, never realizing that the silence on the other end of the line is about to become permanent. Julian, did you see the news? My assistant asks, her voice trembling as she holds out a tablet displaying a bright red breaking news banner. The headline screams that Flight B609 has gone down over the ocean, a jagged metal grave for everyone on board. My heart stops because I finally remember why Silas was calling. He and our son Noah were on that plane to come surprise me at the festival. The champagne in my mouth turns to ash as I realize I just let my entire world vanish while I was worried about my hair. I scream their names into the empty lounge, but the only answer is the cold hum of the air conditioning and the distant flash of cameras outside. At 26, I am a widower who never learned how to be a husband, and a father who treated his son like a social accessory. The grief hits like a physical weight, crushing my lungs until the edges of my vision start to bleed into a suffocating black. I collapse onto the marble floor, praying to a God I don't believe in to give me back the 5 minutes I wasted ignoring that last call. The darkness doesn't stay black. It swirls into a blinding white light that smells like antiseptic and cheap floor wax instead of jet fuel. I hear a voice calling my name, but it isn't Silas's deep, stoic rumble. It's the shrill, annoying pitch of a nurse I haven't seen in nearly a decade. When I finally force my eyes open, I am staring at a hospital ceiling that looks suspiciously like the campus clinic at Oakhaven University. My hands are smaller, my skin is unblemished, and the crushing weight in my chest is gone, replaced by a frantic, drumming heartbeat. You fainted from heatstroke during the freshman orientation, Julian. The nurse says, checking my vitals with a bored expression. I scramble for a calendar on the wall, my breath hitching as I see the date. It is exactly 8 years ago, the first day of my university life. I am 18 again, a spoiled Omega with a clean slate and a memory full of a future that hasn't happened yet. The tragedy of Flight B609 is now 8 years away, and I am the only person on Earth who knows the countdown has started. I tear the 4 out of my arm, ignoring the nurse's protests as I bolt toward the mirror in the corner of the room. The face staring back at me is younger, softer, and hasn't yet been hardened by the bitterness of a loveless marriage I caused. This is the version of me that Adrian used to lead around like a dog, the one who wasted every drop of his scent on a man who didn't care. But if I am here, that means Silas is here too, probably sitting in a library somewhere feeling like half an alpha because of his chair. I need to find him before I lose my nerve or my mind. I burst out of the clinic and into the bright autumn sun of the Oakhaven campus, my legs feeling strangely light and strong. Students are everywhere, whispering about the beautiful Omega who just ran out of the infirmary looking like he's seen a ghost. In my past life, I would have stopped to bask in the attention, but now every second feels like a grain of sand slipping through my fingers. I don't care about the hierarchy or the social games. I just need to see the man I spent years breaking so I can start putting him back together. I know exactly where the transfer students check in, and I'm going to get there first. I reach the administration building panting, my Omega pheromones spiking with a mixture of desperate hope and sheer terror. There, at the bottom of the stone ramp, is a figure in a black coat with shoulders broad enough to carry the world. It's Silas, younger and more guarded, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair as he stares at the stairs like they're an insult. I want to scream his name and throw myself at his feet, but I realize he doesn't even know who I am yet. This is day 1 of my second chance, and I have to make sure he never has a reason to call me 3 times without an answer. I stand frozen at the top of the concrete ramp, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It is the first day of freshman year, and Silas is right there, appearing exactly as he did in the old photos I used to hide in the back of my closet. He looks so young, his jawline sharp and his expression shielded by a mask of cold alpha indifference that I now know is just a cover for his pain. I want to run to him, but I'm an Omega who is supposed to be obsessed with someone else, and the campus is already watching my every move. If I don't play this perfectly, I'll scare him off before I can even say hello. Julian, there you are? A voice booms behind me, dripping with an arrogance that makes my skin crawl instantly. I turn to see Adrian swaggering toward me, his expensive designer jacket slung over one shoulder as he expects me to fall into step behind him like I always did. In my past life, I would have preened under his attention, but now all I see is the man who helped me ruin my own family. He reaches out to ruffle my hair, a possessive gesture that feels like a brand, and I find myself flinching away before I can stop myself. Don't! I snap, my voice sharper than I intended, causing a ripple of shocked whispers to move through the gathering crowd. Adrian's smirk falters, his predatory eyes narrowing as he tries to process why his most loyal follower is suddenly baring his teeth. I don't give him time to recover. I simply pivot on my heel and walk straight toward the ramp where Silas is still struggling with a heavy backpack. I can feel Adrian's gaze burning into my back, a silent promise of trouble that I am more than happy to ignore for the sake of the man in the chair. I reach Silas just as his bag slips from his lap, spilling heavy textbooks across the pavement with a series of loud, mocking thuds. He freezes, his knuckles turning white as he grips the wheels of his chair, his scent turning bitter and sharp with a wave of intense alpha humiliation. I drop to my knees without a second thought, gathering the books with a frantic energy that draws even more eyes to us. He looks down at me, his gray eyes wide with a mixture of shock and suspicion, and for a second, I forget how to breathe because I miss this man so much it physically hurts. I can do it myself, Silas growls, his voice low and defensive, his alpha pheromones flaring in a desperate attempt to push me away. I ignore the sting of his rejection, focusing instead on the way his hands are trembling against the metal frame of his wheelchair. I hold out his linguistics textbook, my fingers brushing against his, and I feel a spark of recognition that nearly brings me to tears. He flinches back from my touch as if I've burned him, but I just offer him the softest, most genuine smile I've ever managed. I'm Julian, I say, my voice steady despite the chaos screaming in my head, and I'm pretty sure we're in the same department. Silas stares at me like I'm a high society hallucination, his brow furrowed as he tries to figure out why an omega of my status is kneeling in the dirt for him. He takes the book slowly, his movements cautious, as if he expects me to laugh and snatch it away at any moment. I realize then just how deep his insecurity runs, a psychological block that I spent a lifetime reinforcing and now have only a few years to break. Behind us, I hear the sound of soft, calculated footsteps and the smell of a weak, cloying omega scent that I remember all too well. Leo appears at Adrian's side, clutching his arm and looking at the scene with a wide-eyed innocence that I now know is a complete fabrication. "Oh dear, Julian, are you okay? You shouldn't be doing such manual labor," Leo chirps, his voice dripping with fake concern designed to highlight how unnatural my behavior is. I don't even look at him, keeping my eyes locked on Silas, whose expression is already shuddering as the social pressure begins to mount. The crowd starts to snicker, and I can see Silas withdrawing into himself, his shoulders hunching as he prepares to be the butt of the first day joke. I feel a surge of protective omega instinct so powerful it makes my vision swim, a vow forming in the center of my soul. I stand up slowly, not to walk away, but to position myself directly between Silas and the rest of the world. I am the most popular omega on this campus, and if I have to burn my reputation to the ground to keep him safe, I'll strike the first match. I can feel Silas's gaze on my back, a heavy weight of confusion and guarded hope that makes my skin tingle. I ignore Adrian's scowl and Leo's performative gasps, focusing entirely on the way the sunlight catches the sharp line of Silas's jaw. I realized in my past life that he always felt invisible in this chair, a ghost haunting the halls of the elite. Today, I am going to make sure everyone sees him, even if I have to be the one to light the fire. I lean down, my silver blonde hair brushing against his shoulder as I whisper that I'm not going anywhere. "Julian, stop playing around and let's go," Adrian demands, his alpha pheromones thick with a possessive edge that usually makes omegas cringe in submission. I don't even flinch, my own scent blooming with a fierce, protective sweetness that acts as a shield for Silas. I can feel the shock radiating from the crowd. The vicious Julian they know is supposed to be laughing at the broken alpha, not defending him. Silas's fingers tighten on the armrests of his wheelchair, his gray eyes searching mine for the punchline he's certain is coming. I simply offer him my hand, a silent invitation to a world where he isn't a victim. Silas doesn't take my hand, but he doesn't push me away either, which is a victory I'll take for a Tuesday morning. We move toward the lecture hall, and I walk at a measured pace right beside his wheels, forcing the high society students to part like the Red Sea. I catch Leo watching us from the corner of my eye, his innocent expression flickering into something sharp and ugly for just a split second. He thrives on being the weak one who needs protection, and my sudden change in script is ruining his spotlight. I feel a smirk tugging at my lips because I know exactly how he plays this game, and I'm about to flip the board. Inside the Introduction to Linguistics Hall, the air is thick with the scent of dozens of alphas and omegas all trying to mark their territory. I bypass my usual seat next to Adrian in the front row and follow Silas to the very back where the wheelchair-accessible desks are tucked away. The professor stops mid-sentence, the chalk clicking against the board as 60 pairs of eyes track the school's most popular omega to the outcast section. Silas looks like he wants the floor to swallow him whole, his scent muting into a defensive, metallic tang. I just pull out my notebook and act like there is nowhere else in Oakhaven I'd rather be. Halfway through the lecture, Leo accidentally drops a heavy glass water bottle right near the back of the room, the shatter echoing like a gunshot. He immediately starts trembling, his sense spiking with a manufactured distress that sends every unbonded alpha in the room into a protective frenzy. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy. I hope I didn't startle anyone," he whimpers, looking directly at me with a challenge in his eyes. Adrian is already half out of his seat to go comfort him, but then he pauses, looking back to see if I'm jealous. I don't give him the satisfaction of even a glance. To my surprise, it's Silas who speaks up first, his voice gravelly and low but carrying to the front of the quiet room. "You should be more careful, Leo. Glass is a hazard for anyone who can't just step over it," he says, his gaze steady and devoid of the pity Leo usually harvests. It's the first time I've heard him defend himself in this timeline, and the sound of his voice sends a jolt of pure electricity through my core. The professor clears his throat, awkwardness filling the gap where Leo's expected apology should have been. I feel a swell of pride that makes me want to brag to the whole world about the alpha sitting next to me. The adrenaline of the moment goes straight to my head, blurring the lines between my memories of the husband I lost and the stranger I'm trying to win back. When the lecture ends, Silas struggles to reach a pen that rolled under the radiator, and I reach for it at the same time he does. Our hands brush, and the heat of his skin against mine triggers a flash of 1,000 nights spent in our shared bed. "Don't worry, husband. I've got it," I murmur without thinking, the words slipping out before my brain can catch it. The room goes deathly silent, and Silas freezes as if I've just slapped him across the face. "What did you just call me?" Silas asks, his voice barely a whisper, a mix of genuine horror and deep, burning confusion in his eyes. I can feel Adrian's alpha aura exploding from across the room, a wave of pure, possessive rage that practically rattles the windows. Leo is staring at me like I've finally lost my mind, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across his face as he realizes how much I've just ruined my reputation. I've only been back for 6 hours, and I've already publicly claimed a man who doesn't even know my last name. The cliffhanger isn't whether I can fix this, but whether Silas will ever let me close to him again. The rumor of my slip-up travels faster than a pheromone spike, and by the night of the freshman gala, the entire campus is buzzing with my supposed madness. I spend 3 hours getting ready, choosing a suit that catches the light like diamonds, not for the cameras, but to show Silas that he deserves the most beautiful omega in the room. As I walk into the grand ballroom, the social hierarchy is already on display, with Adrian standing at the center of the floor like a king awaiting his queen. He looks at me with an expectant smirk, assuming I'll crawl back to my place at his side after my little episode in class. But I didn't come here to dance with a ghost from my past. I came here to rewrite the future for the man in the shadows. Adrian intercepts me before I can even scan the crowd, his grip on my arm firm enough to leave a mark through the silk of my jacket. "I'll overlook the husband comment if you apologize to Leo right now for ignoring him," he says, his voice a low, threatening rumble. I look at his hand, then up at his face, feeling nothing but a cold, clinical disgust for the alpha I once ruined my life to please. I realize that in this life, he has no power over me because my heart is already occupied by a man who actually knows the meaning of the word devotion. I pull my arm away with a sharp tug, leaving him standing there with a look of pure, unadulterated shock. I find Silas tucked away in a corner near the balcony, his high-tech wheelchair looking like a fortress he's built to keep the world out. He's wearing a black suit that makes him look incredibly handsome, though he's staring at his lap as if he hopes he can disappear into the floorboards. The whispers follow me as I cross the room, a chorus of people mocking the crippled alpha, who shouldn't even be at a dance. My scent begins to bloom, a sweet, defiant note of jasmine and sandalwood that cuts through the cloying perfumes of the gala. Silas looks up as I approach, his gray eyes wide with a mixture of dread and a hope he's clearly trying to kill. "Julian, don't do this," Silas whispers as I reach him, his voice cracking with the weight of his own perceived inadequacy. "Go back to Adrian before everyone starts laughing at you for being seen with me." I don't say a word. I just sink into a deep, formal curtsy that is usually reserved for heads of state or mated alphas. The room goes quiet as the music swells, the irony of a high-status Omega bowing to an outcast alpha not lost on a single soul. I look up at him, my eyes burning with a promise I intend to keep for the next 80 years, and ask him for the opening dance. "I can't dance, Julian, you know that," he says, his knuckles turning white as he grips the armrests of his chair. I reach out and cover his hands with mine, my warmth seeping into his skin, as I offer him a smile that I hope tells him everything I'm not allowed to say yet. I tell him that I don't need him to stand to lead me, and that tonight, I will be his legs if he'll just be my partner. I slowly guide his hands to my waist, the contact sending a jolt of pure instinct through my body that makes my Omega pheromones sing. He looks at me like I'm a miracle he's afraid to touch, but he doesn't pull away. We move onto the floor, the wheels of his chair gliding in perfect synchronization with my steps as I spin around him. I can feel the eyes of the entire university on us. Adrian's burning rage, Leo's calculated confusion, and the judgmental stares of the faculty. I don't care about any of them because, for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Silas is looking at me like I'm the only person in the universe. He's maneuvering the chair with a grace that most people are too blind to see, his alpha presence finally starting to leak out from behind his walls. For a few minutes, the tragedy of 2025 feels like a bad dream that I've finally woken up from. Adrian pushes through the crowd, his face twisted into a mask of pure possessive fury as the song comes to an end. "This is a joke, Julian," he spits, his voice carrying across the ballroom as he points a finger at Silas's chair. "You're the Oakhaven heir. You don't belong in the dirt with a broken alpha who can't even stand up to claim you." I feel Silas flinch, his scent turning to the bitter smell of cold iron as he prepares to retreat back into his shell. I step forward, placing myself between my husband and the man who thinks he owns me, my eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "He's worth 10 of you, Adrian, even while sitting down," I say, my voice ringing out with a clarity that silences the entire room. I turn back to Silas, ignoring the gasps behind me, and kiss the back of his hand with a devotion that leaves no room for doubt. Adrian looks like he's about to explode, but Silas is staring at me with a look of such profound, shattered hope that it nearly breaks my heart. I've made my choice public, but as I see Leo whispering into Adrian's ear, I realize that the real war for our future has only just begun. The transition into our sophomore year feels like a victory lap I haven't earned yet, but I'm not wasting a single second of this timeline. I've practically forced my way into being Silas's personal tutor, using my knowledge of the upper-level curriculum to ensure we spend every afternoon together at the Sterling estate. As I walk through the heavy oak doors, the familiar scent of cedar and old books hits me, a ghost of the home we once shared. Silas is waiting in the library, his expression as unreadable as ever, but I notice he's left a chair pulled out right next to his wheelchair for me. There's a small crack in his armor, but in this life, I've learned that small cracks are where the light gets in. "You're late, Julian," Silas says without looking up from his notes, though the slight twitch in his jaw tells me he's been counting the minutes. I don't apologize. Instead, I set down a container of the specific Earl Grey lavender cookies he loved in our past life, the ones he thinks are just a lucky guess. He takes one cautiously, his eyes narrowing as the flavor hits him, a look of haunting familiarity crossing his face for just a heartbeat. I have to bite my tongue to keep from telling him I remember his favorite everything, from the way he takes his tea to the way he breathes when he's dreaming. For now, I have to be the persistent Omega who just happens to be very good at guessing his heart's desires. We dive into the complexities of linguistics, but my mind is focused on a much more difficult language. The way Silas shifts his weight when his legs start to ache. He hides his pain behind a wall of alpha stoicism, but I spent a decade watching him, and I know every micro-expression of his discomfort. I accidentally drop my pen near his foot so I can reach down and subtly check the tension in his muscles, a move that would have been second nature as his husband. He flinches when my hand grazes his knee, his breath hitching in a way that isn't about pain at all, but a sudden, sharp spike of attraction. The air in the library grows heavy with the scent of pine and jasmine, thick enough to drown out the sound of the ticking clock. "Why are you doing this?" he asks suddenly, his voice thick with a vulnerability he usually keeps under lock and key. He looks at me with an intensity that makes my soul ache, searching for the ulterior motive he's convinced I must have as a high society omega. I want to tell him about the plane crash, about our son Noah, and about the years I spent being a monster while he was a saint. Instead, I just lean closer until our foreheads are almost touching, my scent wrapping around him like a soft, physical embrace. I tell him that some people are just worth the effort, even if they're too stubborn to see it themselves. The afternoon sun begins to dip, casting long, golden shadows across the library floor as we continue our tutoring in a comfortable, charged silence. I find myself leaning back, the exhaustion of maintaining this double life finally catching up to my 18-year-old body. My head lolls onto Silas's shoulder, my eyes fluttering shut as I drift into a light sleep filled with the sounds of a child's laughter and the hum of a jet engine. In the haze of the dream, I feel a large, warm hand hesitantly brush a stray lock of hair away from my face. It's the gentlest touch I've felt in 2 lifetimes, and it makes my heart swell until I think it might actually shatter. I wake up slowly, my lips brushing against the pulse point of Silas's neck before I even realize I'm moving. He freezes, his entire body going rigid as my breath fans across his skin. But he doesn't push me away. The kiss is accidental, a ghost of a habit from a marriage he hasn't lived yet, but it feels like a claim that transcends time itself. I pull back just enough to look into his eyes, seeing a swirling storm of desire and absolute terror reflected in the gray depths. He's convinced I'm only doing this to make Adrian jealous, a pawn in a game he doesn't want to play. "Don't use me, Julian," he whispers, his voice trembling with a raw honesty that cuts deeper than any of Adrian's insults. He thinks he's a flawed alpha, a broken tool that I'm picking up just to spite someone else, and the tragedy of his self-loathing is almost too much to bear. I grab his hands, forcing him to feel the frantic rhythm of my heart against his palms, so he knows this isn't an act. I realize then that his disability isn't just about the wheelchair. It's a psychological block built from years of being told he's half a man. If I'm going to save him, I have to be more than his tutor. I have to be the one who convinces him he's already whole. As I leave the estate that evening, I see a familiar car idling at the end of the long driveway. Adrian's black sports car. He's leaning against the hood, his alpha scent sharp with a possessive, predatory edge that makes the hair on my arms stand up. He's realized that I'm not just going through a phase, and the look in his eyes tells me he's done waiting for me to come to my senses. He's already planning his next move to reclaim what he thinks is his, and I know the peace of our study sessions is about to be shattered. The cliffhanger isn't what Adrian will do, but how much Silas will believe him when the lies start flying. The air at my grandfather Arthur's birthday gala is thick with the scent of old money and judgment, a suffocating atmosphere that I used to thrive in. I stand by the grand entrance, my silver blonde hair catching the light of 1,000 crystal chandeliers, waiting for the man who changed my world. Every guest here remembers the old Julian, the one who would have been clinging to Adrian's arm and laughing at anyone who didn't fit our narrow definition of perfection. But today, I'm wearing my family's crest with a new purpose, and I'm not here to play the role of the spoiled Omega heir. I see Silas's car pull up, and my heart does a frantic dance against my ribs, because tonight isn't just a party. It's a declaration of war against anyone who dares to look down on him. Silas enters the room, his jet-black hair styled with a precision that speaks of his nerves, his gray eyes scanning the crowd like he's walking into a lion's den. He's in his high-tech wheelchair, his suit impeccably tailored to his broad shoulders, looking every bit the alpha he is despite the whispers that follow his wheels. I move toward him immediately, ignoring the gasps from my cousins and the pointed glares from the board of directors. I want to tell him he looks incredible, but the way he grips his armrest tells me he's already bracing for the insults he's sure are coming. I reach him and place my hand on his shoulder, letting my jasmine scent anchor him to the spot. Adrian doesn't wait long to make his move, appearing from the crowd with Leo draped over his arm like a trophy. Leo is wearing a soft, pastel blue suit that makes him look like a fragile doll, his wide eyes already glistening with a practiced, innocent distress. Adrian looks at Silas with a sneer that I once mistook for strength, but now I only see the insecurity of a man who needs to crush others to feel tall. I see you brought your charity project to the gala, Julian, Adrian says, his voice loud enough to draw a circle of onlookers. I feel Silas's alpha pheromones flicker with a metallic tang of humiliation, and I have to clench my fists to keep from striking Adrian then and there. A minor alpha named Lucas, one of Adrian's usual sycophants, decides to join the fray to earn some social credit. He laughs, pointing a glass of champagne towards Silas, and asks if the Sterling family has run out of real alphas to represent them. It's a shame, Lucas drawls, his scent turning sharp and aggressive. To see a beautiful Omega wasting his heat on half a man who can't even stand up to toast his hosts. Silas looks down at his hands, his face going pale as the broken alpha label he's fought so hard to escape is pinned to his chest again. I can feel the rage boiling in my blood, a protective instinct that overrides every rule of etiquette my grandfather ever taught me. The silence that follows Lucas's insult is heavy and expectant, as if the whole room is waiting for me to laugh along or walk away. Instead, I step forward, the sound of my heels on the marble floor like a countdown to an explosion. I don't wait for Silas to defend himself. I strike Lucas across the face with a crack that echoes through the ballroom, the force of it sending his champagne glass shattering onto the floor. Lucas stumbles back, his hand flying to his reddening cheek, his eyes wide with the shock of being struck by an Omega. I stand over him, my silver blonde hair shimmering like a halo of frost, my voice as cold as the winter I died in. Keep your mouth shut about my alpha. I snarl, the word alpha, ringing out with a conviction that silences every whisper in the room. I declare to the entire gala, to Adrian, to Leo, and to my own grandfather, that Silas is the only alpha I will ever mate or follow. I can feel Adrian's possessive aura turning into a violent storm of jealousy, but I don't give him a single second of my attention. I turn back to Silas, whose head is slowly lifting, his expression shifting from a mask of doubt to a deep, burning hunger I haven't seen in this life. For the first time, he isn't looking at me like I'm a mistake. He's looking at me like I'm his entire world. The tension in the ballroom is a living thing, a cord stretched so tight it's ready to snap and take the Oakhaven hierarchy with it. Grandfather Arthur watches from the dais, his expression unreadable, but I know I've just thrown away my reputation to protect a man the elites consider a liability. Silas reaches out and takes my hand, his grip firm and grounding, his own alpha scent finally rising to meet mine in a perfect, harmonious chord. Adrian is shaking with rage, but he can't touch us here without looking like the loser he's finally becoming. I lead Silas away from the center of the floor, my heart pounding with a mix of terror and the purest triumph I've ever known. We retreat to the quiet of the balcony, the cool night air of Oakhaven biting at my skin but failing to dampen the fire in my chest. Silas pulls me close, his eyes searching mine for any sign of regret, but all he finds is the unwavering devotion of a man who has already seen the end of the world. You shouldn't have done that, Julian, he whispers, though his hands on my waist tell a completely different story of desperate need. I tell him that I'll do it 1,000 times more, and I realize that the barrier between us is finally starting to crumble. But as I look back through the glass doors, I see Adrian talking to a man in a military uniform, Silas's grandfather, General Sterling, and I know the price for tonight is about to be called in. It has been exactly 18 months since I woke up in that clinic bed, and every day has been a battle to keep the shadows of my past life from swallowing our present. Silas and I are inseparable now, a fixture of the university landscape that still makes people stop and stare, though for very different reasons than before. I spend my mornings watching him study in the library, his focus so intense it's almost physical, but I can see the toll the social pressure is taking on him. He still carries the weight of being a flawed alpha like a lead cloak, fearing that my devotion is a fragile thing that will break the moment he fails to be perfect. I want to tell him that I've already seen him at his weakest and loved him anyway, but I have to let him find his own strength. Despite our closeness, There is a wall Silas refuses to tear down. He won't even discuss the possibility of physical therapy or trying to walk again. He's convinced that if he tries and fails, he'll lose the last shred of dignity he has left in my eyes and the eyes of his family. I've tried to encourage him gently, but the trauma of the accident that put him in that chair has created a psychological block sturdier than any bone. Every time the subject comes up, his scent turns to cold, sharp iron, and he retreats into a silence that feels like a physical barrier between us. I realize that I can't force him to stand. I have to make him want to stand for himself. One rainy evening at the Sterling estate, after we've shared a bottle of champagne to celebrate the end of midterms, the mask finally slips. I'm sitting on the floor by his chair, my head resting on his knee, feeling the warmth of him and the crushing fear that I'm still not doing enough. I start to cry, the tears hot and uncontrollable as I confess that I don't care about the chair or the hierarchy or what the general thinks. I tell him I just want him to be happy, to be the man I know is screaming to get out from behind that wall of self-loathing. He doesn't say anything, but his hand shakes as he strokes my hair, the air thick with a desperate, unspoken longing. You deserve a whole alpha, Julian. Not a ghost who needs to be pushed around. He whispers, his voice cracking with a pain that has nothing to do with his legs. I look up at him, my vision blurred, and tell him that he is the only alpha who has ever been whole enough to hold my heart. I remind him that I chose him when I had everything and he felt like he had nothing, and I'd choose him again in every lifetime I'm given. He looks at me with an intensity that makes my breath catch, a flicker of something new and dangerous igniting in the gray depths of his eyes. I don't realize it yet, but my tears have finally dissolved the last of the psychological mortar holding his block in place. A week later, I arrive at the estate for our usual study session, but the library is empty and the house is unnervingly quiet. I find a note from his physical therapist, a man I didn't even know Silas was seeing, stuck to the door of the private gym in the East Wing. My heart hammers against my ribs as I push the door open, the scent of sweat and pine-scented floor cleaner filling my lungs. I see Silas through the glass, gripped by a set of parallel bars, his face drenched in sweat and contorted with an agony I can barely stand to watch. He's been practicing in secret for months, pushing himself to the breaking point just so he can be the man he thinks I deserve. He doesn't see me watching as he trembles, his legs shaking violently under a weight they haven't carried in years. I want to run in and catch him, to tell him he doesn't have to do this for me, but I know that would be the ultimate insult to his pride. He lets out a guttural growl of frustration and collapses back into his chair, his head hanging low as he gasps for air. I realize then that his devotion to me is just as fierce as mine is to him, a mirror image of the second chance we've both been gifted. I back away slowly, letting him have his privacy, my soul singing with the knowledge that the man I love is coming back to me. The next night, I'm waiting for him in the garden, the scent of blooming roses mixing with the cool evening air of Oakhaven. Silas rolls out to meet me, but instead of stopping a few feet away, he brings the chair right to the edge of the stone patio. He looks at me with a soft, secret smile that I haven't seen since the first timeline, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. Before I can ask him what's happening, he locks the wheels of his chair and places his hands firmly on the armrests. I hold my breath, the world around us falling away until it's just the two of us and the sound of the wind in the trees. To my absolute shock, Silas stands up, his movements slow and agonizing but steady enough to hold his weight. He stands a full head taller than me, a towering alpha presence that feels like a mountain shifting into place after centuries of slumber. I'm frozen, the tears already welling in my eyes as he takes a single, shaky step toward me, his hand reaching out to cup my cheek. He tells me that he's doing this because he wants to be able to hold me at our wedding, not just watch me from below. But as we stand there in the moonlight, a black car with the Sterling crest pulls into the drive, and I know General Sterling has come to collect his due. The arrival of General Sterling feels like a cold front sweeping through the garden, chilling the warmth of Silas's miracle. He steps out of the car, leaning on a cane that looks more like a weapon than a support, his eyes narrowing as he sees his broken grandson standing on his own 2 feet. Instead of pride, I see only suspicion in the old man's face, a look that says he believes I've manipulated Silas into this display for the sake of the Sterling inheritance. I step closer to Silas, my hand finding his for support, ready to face the patriarch who thinks our love is just a social climb. I won't have the sterling name dragged through the mud by a social climbing Omega and a grandson who plays at being a martyr. The general barks, his voice like grinding stones. He threatens to strip Silas of everything. His title, his estate, and his future. If he doesn't break off our engagement and marry a proper mate. I don't wait for Silas to answer. I look the general in the eye and tell him that I loved Silas when the world called him useless, and I'll love him if we have to sleep on the street. My status as an Oakhaven heir means nothing compared to the alpha who just learned to walk for me. Silas tightens his grip on my hand, his posture straightening as he uses his cane not as a crutch, but as a symbol of his new authority. He tells his grandfather that the sterling line ends with him if it means losing the only person who truly saw him. The general's face turns a deep shade of purple, but for the first time, he sees an alpha standing before him who isn't afraid of his shadow or his bank account. There's a long, suffocating silence before the old man finally turns back to his car. His silence the only blessing we're ever going to get. Graduation day arrives at Oakhaven University, a blur of black robes and the scent of celebratory champagne that finally feels sweet instead of like ash. I'm adjusting Silas's cap in the hallway when Adrian corners us one last time, looking desperate and disheveled as his social standing crumbles around him. He tries to claim that he's the only real alpha capable of protecting me. His scent a foul, roiling mess of jealousy and regret. I don't even have to speak. Silas simply steps forward, his dominant alpha pheromones filling the hall with a command that brings Adrian to his knees without a single word being exchanged. We walk across the stage together, the applause of the crowd sounding like a distant ocean compared to the steady rhythm of Silas's footsteps beside me. As I receive my diploma, I catch a glimpse of Leo in the crowd, looking small and forgotten as he realizes his manipulative games no longer have a stage. My life has finally aligned with the future I was robbed of, but with a foundation of honesty that we never had the first time around. I look at Silas and see not just a husband, but a partner who fought through his own darkness to meet me in the light. That night, we sit on the roof of the Sterling estate, the same place where we used to hide from the world in the timeline that ended in fire. The stars are brilliant over the city of Oakhaven, and for a moment, I feel the weight of the 8 years I've lived twice pressing against my chest. I've spent every waking second of this second life terrified that I'd wake up back in 2025 at the site of the crash. I turn to Silas to tell him I love him, but the look on his face stops the words in my throat. Silas reaches out and pulls me into his lap, his touch possessing a familiarity that goes far beyond the 18 months we've spent together in this life. He leans in, his breath warm against my ear as he whispers a sentence that makes my entire world tilt on its axis. "Julian, let's not get on any planes this year," he says, his voice thick with a recognition that shouldn't be possible. I pull back to look at him, my heart stopping as I see the same grief and relief in his eyes that I've been carrying alone since the day I woke up in the clinic. He remembers everything, the neglect, the crash, and the son we lost to my vanity and his silence. We hold each other on that rooftop, two ghosts who have finally found their way home to a life that actually belongs to us. The tragedy of the past is gone, replaced by a vow that we will never let the world break us again. Somewhere out there, our son Noah is waiting to be born into a world where his parents finally know how to love each other properly. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next video.